I don't know if in your neck of the woods, driving has become an adventure sport. It just seems like ever since, the lockdown from COVID has sort of negated and we're out and about, that people are driving like they want to be first everywhere. They want to be first to the stoplight. They want to be first off the stoplight. They want to be first in the line to go up the ramp to the freeway. They just want to be first everywhere. And it's like they're driving like they're in NASCAR, and it's like they're all playing King of the Hill. Y'all remember that game, King of the Hill, where you find a mound of dirt in a play yard or something, and all the kids storm the hill and they push each other down the hill until there's one kid left, and that kid is yelling from the top of the hill, "I'm King of the Hill," until somebody knocks him down, and then they yell, "I'm King of the Hill." And it's like we're all playing that recently here on the streets. And I'm very familiar with this type of game as a scoutmaster. I have watched my scouts and sit there and try to test each other and figure out who's the toughest by such important things and skills as who can hold their hand closest to the fire for the longest, who can hang upside down in their hammock the longest, who can wear their underwear the longest. If you turn it inside out, you get another 2 days, don't you know? Or who can go the longest on a camp out without brushing their teeth and have the nastiest breath. They're all sitting there smelling each other's breath. Come to think of it, nobody ever wanted to figure out who was the best at tying knots, which is probably why when they were hanging upside down in their hammock, I watched so many of them fall flat on their face as the knots gave way. Interesting. We don't know a lot about the disciples that Jesus called. We don't know their ages. We know something about who they were and things like that, but we're not really sure how old they were. From our best guess, based on how long they lived and the fact that Jesus was 30, and if they were calling him teacher, most of them were probably younger than 30, we're guessing that the majority of them were somewhere in their, mid to late teens to 20 somethings. Needless to say, Jesus' disciples were, a lot like my scouts. A lot into the proving themselves worthy phase. And before we get a little, harsh on them and think that maybe they should have been beyond that because they were in the presence of Jesus, I would like to remind all of us that the majority of the people driving out on these streets today are adults. And they're still playing King of the Hill. They're still trying to figure out who's the greatest, who's the best. They're still trying to figure out who's on top. But as adults, we just do it a little more subtly. It oftentimes look like who's got the biggest pay raise, or who can drive the most expensive car, or have the biggest house, or who gets the most likes on Facebook for their post, which is why their Facebook looks like nothing like their real life. And so we still engage in this one-upmanship, this trying to figure out who's the best, who's the greatest. And it's understandable. We want to feel like our lives mean something. We want to feel like those things that we invest a lot of our time into are important. And so we oftentimes want to know that we're doing something worthy, and that it was worth all those long nights working in the office to get that promotion. And we see it all the time in athletes. I think it was Muhammad Ali in 1964 who stood up in front of everybody before his bout with Sonny Liston, I think, I don't know, and said, "I'm the greatest. I knew I was the greatest before I even knew it." And it was shocking. Not necessarily because here was an athlete bragging about himself, but he was bragging about himself before it had happened. And I think Muhammad Ali had something, he knew he had something to offer to the sport of boxing. That was something new. He was going to change boxing forever. And I think he knew that he had some skills that did make him extra special. And I think he was the greatest. And I think the person that Muhammad Ali needed to convince him most he was the greatest was himself. So we all engage in this trying to figure out who's the best. This competition we have with each other. So the disciples are taken, we're told in Mark 9:30 through 37. The disciples and Jesus are taking a road trip to Capernaum. And on the road trip, there's a great deal of talking between the disciples and some arguing. And when they get to Capernaum, Jesus pulls a couple of them aside and goes, so what were y'all arguing about? And they're embarrassed because what they were arguing about was who was the greatest. Who was the greatest disciple? Who more than anyone deserved to sit at the right hand of Jesus. And Jesus realizes that he needs to teach his disciples a lesson. Not like teach them a lesson, but teach them something. They need to learn something about God and God's kingdom. And so he pulls them all together. And he says this very confusing and I don't know, almost contradictory statement. Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and a servant of all. And this is not how it works in our world. If you want to be first, you need to be first. If you want to be in charge, you're not a servant of anybody, you have servants. But Jesus is telling them the exact opposite. If you want to be first, you got to be last of all, and you got to be a servant to all. And then he does this thing that I like to call the lesson of the shy child hiding behind his mother's skirt. And I like to imagine in this gathering in Capernaum that there are, of course, because Jesus always teaches his disciples, not necessarily privately, but within a crowd. So there, around them, there are people listening and serving and helping and inviting Jesus into their house. And there is a mother with a shy child hiding behind her skirt. You know how. I don't want to be here. Jesus takes this shy child hiding behind his mother's skirts and puts this child in the last place this child ever wants to be, right in the middle of all these strangers, right in the middle of all these disciples. And Jesus points to the child and says to his disciples, you need to be more like this child. And I imagine the child is getting very nervous and very certain that this is not where they want to be, and very certain that this is dangerous, and they want their mommy, and they're about to cry. And Jesus, realizing that he's upset, this child's upset, it's a boy in my mind, pulls the child into his arms, comforts the child, and holds the child there in front of the disciples. And says, whoever wants to be first must be last, and last of all, and a servant of all. And if you want to be known in my Father's kingdom, you must come to my Father's kingdom as this child, and welcome this child in the name of my Father. This child being held by Jesus, comforted by Jesus, there only because of Jesus. And then I imagine Jesus puts the child down, whispers something in the child's ear. The child smiles and rolls running back to his mother, hiding behind the skirt, peeks out and waves. So oftentimes, we think that the only way to get ahead in life is at the cost of others. That the only way to be respected in this life is to be the one in charge, the big boss, the one telling everybody else what to do. And here's Jesus telling these young men that that's not the way it works in his Father's kingdom. That in fact, it works the exact opposite way. That the last shall be first, and you're to be a servant to all. That it's not necessarily about who's the greatest, who's the best, who's the first at the stoplight, who's the first off the stoplight. It's about being like that shy child who wants nothing more than to get back to his mother's skirts, the fabric of his mother's skirt, and hide, unsure, uncertain of why they're even there, but knowing that they're there with Jesus and that they're there because of Jesus and that Jesus wants them to serve. This is nothing like the roads of Charlotte, I'm telling you right now. And it's nothing like our world. Yet this is what Jesus is calling us into. This life of being a servant to all, of putting ourselves not first but last to all, so that we will know fully his Father's kingdom. So my friends, I hope that this video finds you well and continue to stay safe. Do know that I did not get into any accidents as I drove to this next house. And I actually drove very safely, and I used my turn signal and everything. Be good to one another. Look for instances to help one another and be of service to one another. Look for instances where you can go, no, please, go ahead. Look for instances where you can be like that child, sitting in the middle of a group of people that they know they should not be in the middle of a group of, and yet are the greatest lesson to those wanting to learn about God. Amen.